Hello, guys. Can you all hear my voice?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very
Yes,
right. Welcome again. I started recording this session. So at the end, hopefully at the end of the section, you will be able to watch this should you want to. And as you requested, I am going to do the lecture on Zoom, just trying to fit up my screen so that I can see you both and you can also see the message board, the Zoom chat and so forth, so trying to fit up. So welcome again. In this session, I'm gonna finish this chapter, this specific chapter that we were doing in the last lecture. Actually, in the last lecture, we covered quite a lot. If you remember, we are doing the subject of Agile development, and we had seen some approaches in Agile, and we've been doing these for some time. And what we covered in Agile development was the most used development and management techniques, such as we have seen the differences between plan-driven development and Agile. We also covered up some of the most frequently used practices, such as Scrum as a development, as a management method. We had seen also development methods such as extreme programming, which can be consisted of 4 different parts, where you follow the user stories, you do pair programming, test-driven development. All this stuff is covered. In the last lecture, I also showed you some even more practices being used in Agile development, such as Kanban is a very popular approach that you will come across in Agile development. In most cases, they will actually combine Kanban with Scrum to take the benefits of both sides, because Kanban is a very visual representation of development, where Scrum is more focused on the sprint cycles. And we also covered up lean development. We said that it's a different concept from Agile, but it's very complementary to Agile. While lean and Agile are not exactly the same thing, when you use all these concepts on the top of one another, such as XP, Scrum, Agile, lean, all together, you kind of like combine these pieces together to make something even bigger. And that's how most companies that you will see that work. So they're not going to embrace the idea of one, but they kind of like mix and match and see how it fits to their agenda. So while in theory, when we discuss these things, they are quite different stuff. In practice, they are working together. So you kind of like combine them, and there are no real boundaries of where lean ends and where Agile starts. You just fit them into your own company, your own organization, and see how it works. In today's lecture, I'm going to give you an assignment. You can actually find the assignment on Moodle. If you have been checking the Moodle page, you'll be able to see it. So if you go to the Moodle page of the course, there is the project section now, which with an uploaded project, you will see the software engineering coursework. There, we're going to discuss this coursework in this class, and we will also finish the subject. So these are the main focuses of my lecture today. And tomorrow I'm going to go into a new subject called software development. We're going to look into more of the software development management side in the next chapter, which is already unlocked there. So should you want to look at it before you come to tomorrow's lecture, you can do that as well from the software project management part. So just to clarify, if you can follow me, please can you write on the group chat if everything is okay for you, because I'm going to start now. Yes, so very good. So I'm going to jump into the part where I left off the last time. We have seen the Kanban practices. We discussed all of this stuff in the last lecture. And today we're going to focus more on what's left. We covered up the differences between Scrum. We had seen the distributed Scrum model, that it is not possible, we said, that the Agile development can be applied 100% to big development companies, like big organizations, because scaling up these methods is not necessarily an easy task. It takes quite a lot of effort, let alone some companies must stay in their structure. It could be very difficult to basically arrange a company in a non-hierarchy style, because big companies need management. On the top of that, they need more organization, more hierarchy. So it is not a practical approach to use a method such as Scrum and 100% apply it. So what they do in scaling up the Agile methods is that they create a model that will fit into their organization. So they try to adapt the needs of Agile, but they do not 100% apply it. So if you select an Agile method and try to apply it to your own organization, that is a large scale global business, this is called scaling up the Agile method. Usually there are also specific methods that are practiced before, especially from the business world, that you can use, which embraces the idea of Agile, but not necessarily apply every single principle. One of these models is called Dsdm, which we're going to see today. So all of this stuff, the crystal, for example, that we did in the last lecture, we discussed crystal. It's an Agile development. You particularly use it for in your own projects, because the roles here are so limited and it only works for small projects. And we explained how it works in the last lecture. So I'm just gonna jump to the Dsdm, which is called Dynamic Software Development Method, and finish this lecture. So what is Dynamic Software Development Method? Dynamic Software Development Method is an Agile project framework. But there is a but here. It doesn't apply many of the Agile principles. So we said that in the Agile development, like there should be some cycles, or it should focus on it shouldn't focus on WIPs that much. It should be that the problems shouldn't be given more than 4 or 5 problems for the developers to deal with, so that they can complete work and go to the next batch. This could be done either in sprint cycles, like in Scrum, or continuously, like in Kanban. But in Dsdm, things are a bit different. Rather than taking up the management part of the Agile development, here only the development part is embraced, and that is done only to some extent. So it doesn't cover up every single Agile development practice, but it takes up only the development part, not the management part, the development part, and try to adapt it to the big business model. Now, Dsdm is very unique in this regard, because probably among these models, this is the only one that comes from our outside discipline. So Scrum, Kanban, extreme programming, test-driven development, these are terminologies specific to our field. Now, IT software business is so big now that some of these practices jump into other practices as well, but technically these terms risen from our own field. Now, with the Dsdm, however, this is a bit different. The Dsdm comes as a terminology from the business world. It is not necessarily an information systems or software engineering terminology. In fact, it is a business model, and it embraces the idea of Agile development in an organized and arguably rapid pace for big businesses. These also assume that in the DSDM that teams are not co-located, which is another important point. So if you remember in Kanban, in Scrum, we are usually assuming that at least the team is together. So there's a team leader or scrum master or the agile agent controlling the activities, and he or she is with the team on a daily basis. They do assign the task within a 15-minute meeting with coffee, and they do their own, Kanban boards or Scrum organization, and they meet on a daily basis to see to reduce WIP, work in progress. That is the focus here, and it works on a pool systems. Where in DSDM this is a bit different. DSDM is basically designed for big companies here, so teams are usually assumed that they are not co-located. This means that you have a big organization. One branch is in Canada, another one is in UK, the other one is in New York, South Africa, Dubai, stuff like this. So it's like the teams are not together. They are together on their own uh, location, but so many parts are going at the same time. So that is why this model is more focused on the management part rather than the development part. It lets you to do the development as agile within those located teams, just like distributed Scrum, but the management part is more strict. So there are four important stages here that you should know: feasibility and foundations, exploration, engineering, and deployment. Another key difference that you will see in the SDM is this is not focused on using the time or WIP as efficiently as the other methods, but this is a very requirement focused model. So here, the main resources for you are the requirement themselves. This is the idea behind the SDM. So here is a model of how it works. So your foundation, which is where the feasibility will happen, forms exploration and engineering. And as you can see, all these three terms are interlinked with requirements. So when we discuss about the SDM, the emphasized word, your main resource are the requirements. And you use those requirements to generate the feasibility, exploration, and engineering. And once this is deployed, the activities are deployed, then you can go forward to do even more exploration, or you can release and start a new cycle. But one of the key differences here is that you can see these activities are not concurrent now. In the integrated development environment, we saw that specifications, development, and validation were concurrent activities, if you remember. Now in here, you see that there is an organization. There is the foundation. Now after foundation, you're gonna do exploration. Now there's a go back in between engineering and exploration, but not a go back arrow in the feasibility and foundation. So some of these parts are still very plan driven, as you can see. So once the engineering is done, where most of the coding, deployment, most of the integration will happen in here, then it will go to an integration phase where it will be now, deployed, it will be configured. You can release the software or start a new cycle. Any questions up until now? No. Very good. So furthermore, DSDM is a generic approach to projects and can be applied to non-software development projects as well, where Scrum is generally more focused on the IT project, something I already mentioned to you. Dsdm retains many of the features of traditional project management methodologies, such as plans, stage boundaries, project board, and a project manager. So right now in this model, we said that there is no project manager in Scrum. It's just the Scrum Master is not a manager. In here you do have a project manager, because this model basically is applied to large businesses fundamentally by embracing some of the ideas of agile development, but not all of it. Once this is done, uh, these are, each team is managed by the project managers in their own locations, and then the project can come together. To look at the differences in between Scrum and the Dsdm, because Scrum is basically the, how do I say, it's just the main way of doing Agile. It's just the mainstream. When we talk about Agile, Scrum is the first word that comes into our mind because it's just mainstream now. So this is why I created a difference. So when we look at Scrum, it's a more lightweight approach that dispenses with much of the documentation, formality, or traditional project management methodologies. In the Dsdm, however, these are still preserved. Just the development type is enhanced so that things could work around a little bit in a more fast-paced environment. Getting on with more differences, some of the distinct features of the Dsdm is that independent framework and unique tools and techniques are used so that the software development is at ease. So the formalities try to be reduced in terms of development, but the management side is still protected. The variables in the development are not time or resources, but the requirements. Remember I said requirements are the main emphasis here in the Dsdm. So foundation, exploration, engineering, they all run through requirements. So the requirements is the key word here. There's no strong focal point on the aspect. Strong focal point on the aspect of stakeholders' communication and involvement in system development. So you can think of the Dsdm as a less harsh, more agile pattern version of a plan-driven environment. So it is not as strict as a very plan-driven hierarchy, but on the management side, they try to keep things as tight as possible, again, to make the stakeholders the focal point, because essentially, as I told you in the previous lectures, big organizations, big companies are not owned by one person only. There is a board of directors, board of people who are owning it. In fact, I gave the example of Facebook. Remember that I told you, if you work in Facebook, you can actually buy a stock value as a worker, as an employee. And as the Facebook earns more money on the market, you also earn money. Your salary increases. So it's that kind of approach. You can, because there are many stakeholders here, the communication and involvement are the keys in the Dsdm. So that is the Dsdm. So we covered a lot of models in this lecture. We covered Scrum, Kanban, development methods such as extreme programming, now Crystal, the Dsdm. And this is just, I would say, the tip of the iceberg. If you actually dig, you will see that there are many, many different approaches being applied by companies. And especially in their job offers or vacancies or business models, you will come across some of these practices. But I put here the most popular ones that you can see on the internet, or the most popular ones that I saw being practiced. By all means, this doesn't mean that these are the only agile ones. There are, of course, many more techniques, even some that I didn't even hear perhaps. And you are very welcome to look into this subject and share in this meetings if you learn something, like if you discover a new agile methodology, for example. You are very welcome to come and discuss in here. So, what is Agile? IBM's agility at scale model. Now, IBM has a huge experience in this kind of development because this is one of the companies that have been around for decades now, and they know what they are doing. They have been doing this stuff for a very, very long time. So, to help people out, they generated a scale model that will guide you like a guideline, that if you have a big company, this will give you an idea of how you can apply agile to large scale businesses where you have large team size, geographical distribution, some sort of complexity in your organization, such as technical, enterprise, business, and so forth. So they come up with some suggestions, I would say, that will help you out to make your global business in an agile driven model. Now, because of the success of Agile, particularly on medium to small size businesses, the big companies are almost desperate to find a way to apply this to their own business model because they saw efficiency. And but because of their structure, it is very difficult to apply this on a large business model. So they have been looking up ways how to scale this, and the IBM's agility scale model is just giving us an idea of what we need to pay attention if we want to apply agile to big businesses. So let's go through it. A completely incremental approach to requirement engineering is not possible in big systems. So one of the first things you will come across with agile agility model that IBM developed is that you need to understand that whatever you do, there is no way that an incremental approach 100% it's going to work for your big business, because this is not why it is invented. Just because an app that is developed in, let's say, like small apps that you use on your phone are developed in an agile model, doesn't mean that a big company can 100% apply this and it will work fine. In fact, it will be a disaster if you do that. So be aware of that. There is no 100% way to apply incremental approach to your large business model, and it's not going to work. Second thing they tell us is that there cannot be a single product owner or customer representative because of how you structure your business. You have a large business, probably owned by many stakeholders. There cannot be one single person who owns the product or just one customer representative. Your customer could be wide in range, and your product should have multiple branches to do multiple stuff, even multiple versions being developed at the background, probably. For large system development, it is not possible to focus only on the code of the system. Now, you know that in agile development, majority of the documentation is skipped and it's not applied. It takes that as something extra on a discussion board like user stories and so forth, and reduces the WIP. But in here, this is not possible. The large system development should not only focus on the software production, it should also focus on documentation, configuration, some perhaps manuals, help, wikis, even wikis for using that software. All of this stuff should come together. For a small application that you are doing, you don't need to create a help documentation. But imagine that you release a Windows scale software like an operating system without any help, without any customer support, without no documentation where things are done. I mean, I don't even know how to do some stuff on Windows. So every time that I want to do something, I have to go to Google and search for it. Like, how do I disable my Windows Defender or something like that? Because it's so complicated sometimes. I've been using Mac for quite a long time, And now I use Windows at home because I teach visual programming and other classes that only works on Windows environment, and I struggle a bit and I forget like where to look at what. And without those documentation, I would be, for example, personally incapable of doing a lot of things because it's a very customizable software. And imagine you release a software like this scale without any documentation, people would be lost. It's not only the developers or the management, people would be lost. So it's not only about releasing a software, but supporting that software as well with proper documentation, proper support, proper customer service, and so forth. So we cannot take up the software development only with the code. That's not possible in a large scale. Cross-team communication mechanisms have to be designed and used. So because there are multiple teams doing work at the same time, you need to make sure that they communicate with one another. Continuous integration is practically impossible. However, it is essential to maintain frequent system builds and regular releases of the system. So a continuous approach such as Kanban is not possible in a large scale where you can stress the number of WIPs and pull system structure. That is not going to work for you 100%. But you can still try to focus on building the system as frequently as possible. This is not going to be every 3 weeks or every 4 weeks like in the Scrum model, but maybe it will be in every 8 months, 6 months, or whatsoever, or in small patches, how you get your updates on Windows environment. For like every 2 weeks or something, my Windows tries to update itself secretly behind the scenes. So even that can be counted as a small agile model. We already discussed this. So scaling to large systems is important, but you need to make sure that all these aspects that the IBL agility model tell us, you're not going to reach them 100%. There is, of course, much more than that. If you go to the agility model itself, you will see that the risk-driven life cycles should be, valued after the core development done. You should really scale that up, and you will see value-driven life cycles, self-organizing teams focusing on the construction of work in the core development. And finally, any kind of scale for agility should be covering up the core development. So what you do here is that you don't touch the core development method, you just scale that into an agile model, such as large team size can be driven as agile by scaling factors, enterprise discipline, organizational complexities, and so forth. Like I said, these are just suggestions of how you structure a large business into an agile model. But as you can see from the guidelines, some of things are almost impossible to achieve, and it's not going to be 100% agile no matter what you do. So that is the end of my chapter. In this chapter, we covered up software specification, design, implementation, validation, and evolution. We also seen the models as well. And we talked about these models such as extreme programming, Scrum, Kanban, Crystal, Dsdm, and so forth. Now, if you have any questions, I'm going to take questions from you before I end up this session and open another one. I have under 8 minutes now, some time. So if you want to discuss, we can discuss within these 8 minutes time. Any questions?
Yes, doctor, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Yes, Dr. Chan, actually, I have a question, but it is connected to the project which has been given to us.
The project? Which project?
The one that has been given to us on the, sorry, the one which is.
I will discuss the project, Ravant. I haven't discussed the project yet. Okay, I just
Okay,
finished the
you
chapter.
told in the model.
I will discuss it right now in the next session. That's what I'm gonna do. But
Okay.
I was asking if you have any questions about this topic, particularly agile development. Like this is probably now the core of software engineering. This is probably the most important topic that I covered in this course so far. So if you don't understand anything, if you are following, you said, for example, previously that you are applying for jobs. So if you are continuously applying for software engineering jobs on LinkedIn or Indeed or other platforms, particularly abroad, I believe that it is impossible nowadays that you didn't see agile development in those job applications. They will mention it for sure. So if you don't understand anything, please ask it.
Okay, sorry, teacher, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have a question about the dynamic software development management,
Yes.
which is different from agile approach.
Yes.
By which is not we say not apply the principle of the agile, and we are focusing on the agile approach, which is uses in the small and medium company for software development.
That is correct. Yes.
And we see that the DSDM, which is focused on the requirement.
Yes.
Just focusing on the requirement, it is enough to be used in the large company or big company.
Good question. First of all, you need to understand that this concept, the SDM, is a business model rather than something agile. What they want to do is, look, there's something called agile. This is how the stakeholders see it. There's something called agile, and it obviously motivates developers to work in a less chaotic, more organized way, which we can foresee the future a bit more about our delivery. So let's apply it. But then what they don't cannot do is they cannot 100% apply it. Okay, so because of how their business model works, it's a large company, thousands of people are working on it. So it's not like they have small teams so they can meet daily and stuff like this. It's not going to work for them because they have many teams, many people, many departments, and it's organized in a way for years now that way, so they cannot simply change it. What they do, however, is that they take up the good bits that they can ease these tasks a bit. The requirement is a big emphasis on Dsdm because this is the core of the business world. If your customer is asking for a specific thing in the requirements section and you deliver it, then it means you're going to increase your profit. Okay? So assume that right now in this situation, even though many of the businesses have stopped working, most of the supermarkets and health sector is still maintaining their integrity and their profit as well. They are not in a situation that they are not benefiting or getting disadvantage of this pandemic situation. So their requirements are organized in a way to satisfy this condition. You can think of the models that apply the SDM is the same. They are very focused on what the people want and how to deliver that as soon as possible so that they can increase their profit. Okay? In large businesses, the software delivery is unfortunately less about passion, and it's more about business, more about money. Okay, this is why the SDM, I think, is very focused on the requirements, delivering those requirements rather than anything else. Okay, does that answer your question?
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Remember that DSDM among the models is the only one that is not coming from the software world. It's coming from the business world. And we software engineers, and I don't want to do an separation, But software engineers tend to think more aesthetically. They want to deliver something that they want to use, and they want to polish their software because it is seen as a product, a small baby, let's say, that they are producing. And they pay attention to this, but management do not necessarily see it like this. For them, what makes profit is much more important than how that software is basically delivered. Okay, so they do still care because you have to work for them, but the emphasis is more on the customer and what they want and what they want to see in their software product. So I am under 2 minutes now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this session, invite you to another one. And in that session, I will accept more questions if you have any. And I will also go through the assignment that I have uploaded so we can discuss this. Okay. So see you in Big Blue Button in a while.